To kind of get started, everyone is really, really interested, especially with our Vietnam vets. Did you, what originally got you, shall we say, interested or even thinking about joining the military? Did you have family, or did a movie, maybe the Green Berets that you saw in the movie theater, or what got the military on your radar?
My dad was in the Army in World War II. He was a forward observer. But as a lot of those guys, they didn't speak about the war. So I was aware of it. When I got into school, especially, junior high school and high school, I was drawn to read a lot about World War II. Those were my heroes. 82nd Airborne, 101st, 1st Special Service Force, the Marine Corps. Just I just read a lot about the Pacific and the battles in Europe, and it was interesting to me. So when I graduated from high school, I went to work. I was working with my dad at the time for a company that he worked for, and just kind of putzed along, not really having any guidance or leadway or direction. And I got married in June of '66, and in July of '66, I got a draft notice. So I went down to recruiter because I thought, man, I'd like to go airborne. And about that same time in there, Donellan had won the Congressional Medal of Honor as an A camp commander. And we were starting to hear a little bit about Green Berets. Barry Sadler had his song out. So I went down to see the recruiter and said, hey, I'd like to go airborne. And the guy said, yeah, you can do that, except the only difference is you have to come in at least one day earlier than your draft report date. So I came in 26th of August of '66, and on I guess, airborne contract. I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky for basic training, and you take all the tests to find out what you're capable of and what you're. Back then it was called a GT test, Golf Tango General. I don't know what it stood for, but that made the decision on what schools you could go to, what you were qualified to do. So I did well on the GT test, and qualified for about anything that was going to happen. Well, they sent me to radio operator school at Fort Knox, and I learned Morse code and land navigation and stuff like that, and all the old radios that we had in the Army at the time. And I did that for a period of time. I graduated from radio operator school and went to Fort Benning for jump school. And at Fort Benning, I think they do the same thing now. There was a Green Beret liaison, and the whole class is in this auditorium. And this guy comes in a Green Beret, and he gets up on the stage and he gives his spiel, and he said, anybody interested, see me after we're done, So I was interested. I thought that'd be cool. And so it was scheduled to take, uh, you had about 4 hours of testing that you had to take on like a Saturday or something. And I went back, took the testing, qualified. So when I graduated from jump school, I had orders for Fort Bragg for the SFQC. Back then, it wasn't a selection course; it was SF qualification course. So I reported back to Bragg, down to Bragg, and that was sometime the first of '67. And while I was at Bragg, they put me in, we went through the SFQC course and graduated, went to MOS training, and again, they made me a radio operator. And we were called 05Bs back then. That was the MOS code. And so that's where I met Tilt, all those group of guys. We were all radio operators together in school. So we went through that process. A couple of guys, a lot of our instructors were Vietnam vets. They'd been at A camps and stuff early on. And so it was kind of interesting because you had these guys that had done this stuff and they were coming back and sharing with us. And it kept things interesting.
Was Mr. Villarosa y'all's commo teacher?
Yeah,
Paul
he was
Villarosa?
one of our combo instructors. And if I remember correctly, he had tattoos all over him, which was unusual in SF back then. In SF back then, there were a lot of assignments that you couldn't get if you had tattoos. They just wouldn't meet the cover if you were going to do something like Berlin Brigade. We had an A detachment in Berlin, and those guys couldn't have tattoos at all. And because they were doing a lot of spooky stuff, and nobody knew what they were doing, but that they were one of those units that everybody kind of whispered about, Berlin Brigade guys. So anyway, Villarosa was our instructor, and he'd been a merchant marine, I think, and he had tattoos all over him. And one of his tattoos was a dotted line across the bottom of his throat, and it said "cut on dotted line." But he was a tremendous radio operator, instructor. And right after we got out of radio school, he went back to Vietnam and actually went up to the CNC detachments, was SOG, and was killed. Actually, he was killed before we got back in country, or we got in country, I think. So late 77, early 68, or late 67, early 68, he was killed on a recon team out in Laos. So, but yeah, there were some really, it was a good time. We had a good time. But at the end of the radio course, they said, We need, I think it was like 20 volunteer radio operators to go to this school, and then you'll be assigned to MACVSOG in Vietnam. And what they wanted was they sent us to Fort Gordon, Georgia to learn to be teletype operators. And we got down, so Tilt and John Driscoll